A billionaire thought he had everything, but it took a kind waitress and her playful heart to teach him what true wealth really is. Ethan Cole's life looked perfect from the outside. He was one of those people everyone admired but no one really knew. He had built a huge tech company from scratch, made billions, and lived in a penthouse so high up that the city lights looked like stars beneath his window. But behind all the success and luxury, there was a quiet sadness. His world was silent, except for the soft hum of machines and the gentle sound of his son's toys. His 6-year-old son, Mason, was everything to him. Ethan loved him more than anything, yet he often felt like he didn't know how to reach him. Mason was different from other children, quiet, shy, and lost in his own little world. He barely spoke, avoided eye contact, and seemed to only feel safe when he was alone. Ethan had hired the best therapists, teachers, and nannies money could buy, but none of them lasted long. They all said Mason needed connection, not control, but Ethan didn't know what that meant anymore. He only knew how to solve problems with logic and money. Every morning started the same way. Ethan would dress in his sharp suit, hand Mason to the nanny, and head to his office in a black car. His assistant would hand him a tablet full of numbers and deals, and the day would pass in a blur of meetings. But even when he signed million-dollar contracts, his mind was always with Mason. He often replayed the memory of his son's small hand gripping his finger for the first time. That was the last time he remembered feeling truly at peace. One cold afternoon, after a long and tiring business meeting outside the city, Ethan sat quietly in the back seat of his car, while Mason looked out the window. The sky was gray, and raindrops rolled down the glass. The driver turned and said, "Sir, we're running low on gas. There's a small diner a few miles ahead. Should I stop?" Ethan hesitated. He didn't like public places, especially not small ones. People always stared, whispered, or tried to take photos. But Mason hadn't eaten all day, and Ethan couldn't stand the thought of his little boy being hungry. "Fine," he said softly. The car pulled up outside a small diner that looked like it hadn't changed in 20 years. The neon sign flickered, and the smell of pancakes and coffee floated out when the door opened. Ethan stepped inside, holding Mason's hand tightly. The place was warm and cozy, filled with chatter and the clinking of plates. It was a world far away from Ethan's polished offices and private restaurants. A waitress with curly brown hair and a friendly smile came over. Her name tag said Lucy. She greeted them with a cheerful, "Hi there, table for two?" Ethan nodded stiffly, still feeling out of place. Lucy led them to a booth near the window and handed over menus. Mason hid behind his father, his small hands clutching Ethan's sleeve. Lucy noticed. She crouched down, lowering herself to Mason's level. "Hey, buddy," she said gently. "What do you feel like today? Pancakes? Maybe chocolate milk?" Mason didn't answer. He kept his eyes on the floor. Ethan started to apologize, but Lucy just smiled. "That's okay," she said. "You take your time." Ethan was used to people giving up quickly when Mason didn't respond, but Lucy didn't walk away. She looked around, spotted a napkin, and suddenly did something completely unexpected. She placed the napkin on the floor, crouched down, and began crawling like a dinosaur. "Ray?" she said playfully. A few customers turned to look, smiling at the funny sight of a grown woman pretending to be a dinosaur on the diner floor. At first, Ethan froze, not sure what to do. He felt embarrassed and out of place. But then, something happened that he hadn't seen in a long time. Mason smiled. A real, full smile. His eyes lit up, and a soft giggle escaped his lips. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't remember the last time he had heard that sound. Lucy grinned. "There it is," she said softly, crawling closer. "I knew you had a smile hiding in there." Mason peeked at her again and let out another little laugh. Ethan just sat there, completely stunned. For a moment, he forgot about who he was. The billionaire, the CEO, the man with all the answers. He was just a dad watching his son laugh for the first time in weeks. When Lucy finally stood up, she wiped her hands on her apron and smiled at Ethan. "He's got a great laugh," she said. Ethan nodded slowly, still trying to find his voice. "He doesn't usually do that?" he said quietly. "Well, Lucy said with a wink. He just needed the right dinosaur, I guess. Ethan felt something strange in his chest, a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. He watched as Lucy brought Mason a glass of chocolate milk, carefully placing it in front of him. She didn't push him to talk or act a certain way. She just made him feel safe. Mason sipped his drink, his small legs swinging under the table. Ethan realized he hadn't seen him this relaxed in months. The rest of the meal passed quietly but peacefully. Ethan barely touched his food. He was too busy watching Mason draw smiley faces and spilled syrup and listening to Lucy's cheerful voice as she chatted with other customers. There was something real about this place, something honest and warm. When it was time to leave, Lucy came back with the check. "You two come back any time," she said with a smile. "Mason still owes me a dinosaur roar." Mason looked at her shyly and whispered something only Ethan could hear. "Ray." Ethan froze again, his eyes widening. Mason had spoken. It was a tiny sound, but it was real. Lucy didn't hear it, but Ethan did. He wanted to say thank you, but the words got stuck in his throat as they walked out into the rain. Ethan helped Mason into the car and sat beside him, lost in thought. For years, he had believed that only the best doctors and experts could help his son. But a simple waitress in a small diner had done more in 5 minutes than anyone else had in months. As the car pulled away, Ethan looked back at the diner's glowing sign. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like a man running from his own loneliness. He felt something softer hope. That night, after putting Mason to bed, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, thinking about Lucy. He didn't even know her last name. But her laughter and kindness kept echoing in his mind. Something about her felt different, genuine. She didn't see money or fame. She had just seen a little boy who needed a friend. Ethan realized he wanted to see her again. Not because she made Mason laugh, but because she made him feel something he thought he'd lost forever. And somewhere deep down, he knew this wasn't the last time they would cross paths. The next morning, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about that small diner and the strange, warm woman named Lucy. He had barely slept the night before. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Mason smiling at her silly dinosaur crawl. That image stayed in his mind like a movie he didn't want to end. Mason had laughed, spoken a word, and looked at someone other than him without fear. It felt like a miracle. Ethan didn't really believe in fate or signs, but something about that day wouldn't leave him alone. He tried to go through his usual morning routine, reading business reports, answering emails, joining calls, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the diner. He remembered the smell of pancakes, the sound of Lucy's laugh, and the way Mason's tiny face had lit up. For the first time in months, his son had looked happy. He kept wondering what made Lucy so different. Why could she reach Mason when trained professionals couldn't? By lunchtime, he made a sudden decision that even surprised him. He told his driver to take him and Mason back to that diner. His assistant reminded him that he had an important meeting, but Ethan simply said, "Reschedule it." The assistant went silent. Nobody ever told Ethan Cole what to do, but today, he didn't feel like the billionaire everyone obeyed. He just felt like a father chasing something real when they arrived. The diner looked exactly the same, small, cozy, full of noise and chatter. Lucy was behind the counter, pouring coffee for a couple of old men and laughing at one of their jokes. When she looked up and saw them, her eyes lit up. "Well, look who's back," she said with a smile. "My favorite dinosaur team." Mason hid behind Ethan's leg for a second, then peeked out shyly. Lucy crouched down again, holding out her hand. "Hi, Mason," she said softly. "You came back. I was worried you forgot about me." Mason didn't speak, but he reached out and placed a small toy car in her palm. Lucy gasped dramatically. "A car for me?" "Oh no, I don't have a garage for it," she said, pretending to panic. Mason giggled again, and Ethan felt that same warmth spread through him. They sat at the same booth by the window. Lucy brought over crayons and a coloring sheet, something she said they gave to kids sometimes. Mason picked up a blue crayon and began to draw without being told. It was such a simple thing, but Ethan watched like it was the most important moment in the world. Lucy looked at him and smiled. "He's really sweet," she said. "He just needs someone who talks his language." Ethan raised an eyebrow. His language? Lucy nodded. Yeah, some kids don't use words the way we do. They talk with their eyes, their movements, even their silence. You just have to listen differently. Ethan thought about that. No one had ever said it like that before. Everyone always talked about what Mason couldn't do. Lucy talked about how to understand him. As Mason colored, Ethan found himself asking her questions. Do you have kids? He asked quietly. Lucy shook her head, her smile fading slightly. No, she said after a pause, but I used to help my sister with her son. He had autism too. Ethan listened as she told him about her nephew, Jamie. She described how he loved drawing animals and listening to the same song every night before bed. Her eyes softened when she spoke, but there was sadness too. He passed away 2 years ago, she said softly. He got sick, and, well, we still miss him every day. Ethan didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to hearing people speak so openly, especially about pain. In his world, people hid behind polite smiles or expensive suits. Lucy was different, real, and open in a way that made him feel both comfortable and unsteady. I guess that's why I noticed Mason, she said, forcing a small smile. He reminded me of Jamie a little. The way he holds things, the way he watches people without saying much. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. You helped him, he said quietly. You helped both of them. Lucy shrugged. I just treat them like people who see the world in their own way. You don't have to fix them. You just have to join them where they are. Her words stayed in Ethan's mind for the rest of their meal. Mason drew dinosaurs. Lucy made funny faces. And Ethan found himself laughing for the first time in years. It felt strange, but good. He didn't care that a couple of customers whispered or that one man looked surprised to see the billionaire. Ethan Cole, sitting in a small-town diner. He wasn't there to impress anyone. He was there because his son was happy. When they finished eating, Ethan left a generous tip without saying anything. Lucy noticed, but didn't comment. Thank you for coming back, she said as they stood up to leave. Mason's a great kid. You should bring him again sometime, Ethan nodded. We will, and he meant it. That evening as they drove home, Mason hummed quietly in the back seat. It was a soft, tuneless sound, but it made Ethan's heart swell. His son rarely made sounds at all, but now he seemed peaceful. Ethan glanced at him in the mirror and smiled. The next few days, he found excuses to visit the diner again. Sometimes they just stayed for breakfast. Sometimes they dropped by after Mason's therapy sessions. Every time, Lucy welcomed them with that same bright energy. She never treated Ethan like a celebrity. She treated him like a dad, trying to do his best. One morning, a photographer snapped a picture of them through the diner window. The next day, a gossip blog posted the headline, Billionaire CEO spotted in diner with mystery waitress. The story spread fast. People online called Lucy the lucky waitress, and others said she was after his money. When Ethan saw the articles, he felt a mix of anger and guilt. He hadn't meant to bring that kind of attention to her. When he arrived at the diner that day, Lucy looked uneasy. Guess I'm famous now, she said with a nervous laugh. Never thought my picture would end up online because of pancakes. I'm sorry, Ethan said. I didn't mean for that to happen. She shrugged. It's okay. I know it's not your fault. But Ethan could tell it had upset her. Some customers whispered when they saw her, and one even asked if she was dating him. Lucy ignored the comments, but her smile was tighter than usual. After Mason finished eating, Ethan stayed behind for a moment while Lucy cleared the table. I don't want to make things difficult for you, he said quietly. You haven't, she replied, still smiling softly. But maybe don't bring your photographers next time. I didn't, he said quickly. They follow me sometimes. I figured, she said with a little laugh, then looked at him seriously. You know, you don't have to live like that. You don't always have to be the billionaire. You can just be a dad here. Her words hit him deep. Nobody ever spoke to him like that. Everyone either feared him or flattered him. But Lucy saw right through him, straight to the man who just wanted to make his son happy. As they left, Ethan looked back at her one more time. She waved at Mason, who waved back shyly. Ethan realized something had quietly changed inside him. He wasn't sure what it was yet, but he felt lighter, calmer, more human. He didn't know where this strange connection with Lucy was heading. But one thing was clear: she had reached not only his son's heart, but his own. Days began to blend into each other, and soon, visiting the little diner became part of Ethan and Mason's routine. It wasn't planned at first. Ethan would just find himself thinking about the place whenever Mason got quiet or withdrawn. He had tried many ways to connect with his son before, but nothing had worked like that small, simple diner and the woman who worked there. Lucy seemed to have a way of making the world softer, easier to understand. Mason felt safe with her. Ethan couldn't deny that he did too. Every time they walked through the glass door, Lucy would greet them as if she had been waiting all day. "My favorite dinosaur team," she would say with a grin. Mason's eyes always brightened when he saw her. He would crawl into the booth, sometimes even before Ethan sat down, and wait for Lucy to bring crayons, pancakes, and that special chocolate milk she made just right. Ethan started to notice little things about Lucy. She always remembered Mason's favorite color. She made animal shapes out of napkins to make him laugh. She never rushed them, even when the diner was busy. Her energy was calm, her laughter genuine, and her care effortless. One afternoon, while Mason was coloring dinosaurs, Ethan finally asked her, "Why do you work here? You seem like someone who could be doing more." Lucy smiled as she wiped a table. "More like what?" "I don't know," Ethan said. "Something bigger. Your patient kind you could teach or run a center for kids." Lucy shrugged, still smiling. "Maybe someday. Right now I just need this job. It pays the bills, and I like meeting people. Besides, I like it here. It's honest work." Her answer surprised him. In his world, people always wanted more money, more fame, more power. But Lucy spoke like someone who already had what she needed. It made him think about his own life, about all the things he had collected that still couldn't fill the empty space inside him. After that, they began talking more often. Sometimes Lucy sat with them for a few minutes during her break. She told him about growing up in a small town, about her mother who was sick but getting better, and about how she had once dreamed of becoming a teacher. Ethan found himself telling her things he had never said out loud before: how lonely it was being rich, how hard it was to be both a father and a CEO, how afraid he was that Mason would never be able to live a normal life. Lucy never judged him. She just listened, her eyes soft, her voice gentle. "You're doing better than you think," she told him one day. "You show up for him. That's what matters." Ethan didn't reply, but her words stayed in his heart. One weekend morning, Ethan took Mason to the diner again, and this time, Lucy had something special planned. "Guess what?" she said, smiling. "We're making pancake dinosaurs today." She poured the batter on the griddle in funny shapes and flipped them high in the air, making Mason giggle uncontrollably. The sound filled the diner, and even the older customers smiled watching them. Ethan's chest felt full as he watched the scene. It was such a small thing, but to him it felt huge. After breakfast, Ethan found himself standing outside with Lucy, while Mason played with a paper airplane. "You're good with him," he said quietly. "Better than anyone I've ever met." Lucy smiled shyly. "He's easy to love. He just needs people who see him, not his differences." Ethan nodded slowly. "You see him?" he said. "I try to," she replied. "But you're his dad, Ethan. He sees you too, you know. He just shows it differently." That simple statement hit him hard. No one had ever said that before. He looked at Mason, who was chasing his little airplane, laughing as it dipped into the parking lot puddle. Maybe Lucy was right. Maybe Mason did see him in his own quiet way. As the weeks passed, Ethan noticed something new. Mason began talking more. Not full sentences, but little words here and there. Car, milk, Lucy. Every new word felt like a gift. Ethan started keeping a small notebook where he wrote them down. Each one felt like proof that his son was slowly coming back to him. But it wasn't just Mason who was changing. Ethan was changing too. He started leaving his phone in the car when they went to the diner. He laughed more, worked less, and began spending evenings reading with Mason instead of answering emails. His employees noticed he smiled more, and his driver said he looked lighter somehow. Ethan didn't realize it, but the walls he had built around himself were slowly coming down. One evening, as they sat in the diner, a photographer showed up again. The flash went off before Ethan could stop him. Lucy flinched but kept serving customers. Later, when she came to their table, she said quietly, "You know this attention." "It's not really my thing," Ethan sighed. "I know. I hate it too." She smiled sadly. "I guess it's part of your world." "Doesn't have to be," he said. "Not here." Lucy nodded but didn't reply. There was something unspoken between them, a quiet understanding that they came from different worlds, yet somehow belonged in the same small one whenever they were together in that diner. One day, Ethan surprised Lucy by asking, "Would you ever consider working with kids again? Maybe doing what you did for your nephew, but for more families?" Lucy blinked. "You mean like a therapy center?" "Something like that," he said. "I could fund it. You'd know what it needs better than anyone." She laughed softly. "You don't waste time, do you?" "I don't like wasting chances," he said. "You helped Mason in a way no one else could. You could help more kids like him." Lucy looked touched but uncertain. "That's a kind offer," she said, "but I wouldn't know where to start." "I'm just a waitress." Ethan shook his head. "You're not just anything, Lucy. You're the reason my son laughs again." Her eyes softened, and for a moment, the noise of the diner faded around them. Then she looked away, blushing slightly. "You're a good man, Ethan," she said quietly, "even if you don't always believe it." That night, when Ethan tucked Mason into bed, his son looked up at him and whispered, "Lucy, nice." It was a small phrase, but it melted Ethan's heart. He kissed Mason's forehead and whispered back, "Yes, she is." His days turned into weeks. Rumors about Ethan and the waitress continued online, but he didn't care anymore. His world had started revolving around smaller things: Mason's laughter, Lucy's smile, the smell of pancakes, and the sound of crayons scratching on paper. He didn't know where all of it was heading, but for the first time in a long time, he didn't need to control everything. One late afternoon, they arrived at the diner to find Lucy looking tired but still cheerful. Ethan asked if she was okay. She told him her mother had been having bad days again, but she was managing. Without thinking, Ethan offered to help. "I can send someone to drive her to her appointments," he said. Lucy hesitated. "That's really kind, but you don't have to." "I want to," he said softly. She looked at him, then smiled weakly. "You're a strange man, Ethan Cole. Most people with your kind of money don't come to diners. They definitely don't care about waitresses' mothers." Ethan smiled back. "Maybe I'm learning what really matters." Lucy laughed quietly and said, "Then you're learning fast." As he watched her walk back to the counter, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years, a calm, gentle kind of happiness. It wasn't the excitement of business wins or success. It was something simpler, purer. He didn't realize it yet, but his life was slowly being rewritten by a boy who was finally smiling, a woman who had taught him how to see again. It had been a few weeks since Ethan and Mason had made the diner their regular spot. Each visit brought small joys: Mason laughing at Lucy's silly antics, Ethan feeling lighter with each giggle. But one rainy evening, things didn't go as smoothly. Mason had been restless all day. Therapy had left him exhausted, and the long car ride only made him more irritable. As soon as they stepped into the diner, Mason's frustration bubbled over. He refused to sit in the booth, threw his napkin on the floor, and started yelling. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He wasn't used to public meltdowns. He had been through tantrums before, but not ones that drew so much attention. A few customers stared, some whispered, and one man even muttered, "Rich kid acting out." Ethan froze. He didn't know whether to drag Mason out or try to calm him on the spot. His hands were shaking slightly. Lucy noticed immediately. She didn't panic. She knelt on the floor, just like she had the first day they met, and looked Mason in the eyes. "Hey there, buddy," she said gently. "I see you're upset. Do you want to show me what's bothering you?" Mason didn't respond at first. He just stamped his feet. Lucy didn't push. She stayed there on the floor, calm and patient, giving him space. Slowly, Mason crawled toward her, and she picked up a small toy dinosaur she had lying around. "Do you want to play with Rex?" she asked softly. Mason nodded slightly. Ethan watched, completely stunned. He had no idea how she did it. People had told him over and over that Mason needed discipline, structure, control, but Lucy didn't do any of that. She simply understood him. She read his emotions, mirrored his behavior, and let him lead. The meltdown continued for a few minutes, but Lucy never lost her composure. She crawled on the floor, made dinosaur noises, and encouraged Mason to interact without forcing him. Slowly, Mason's tears turned into quiet sniffles, and then into soft giggles. Ethan could hardly believe it. His son was calming down not because of a strict command or reward, but because of Lucy's patience and empathy. After a few minutes, other customers started to smile at the scene rather than stare. Some even whispered compliments. Ethan felt a mix of pride and amazement. He realized that what Lucy was doing wasn't magic, it was simple human connection. Something he had never truly understood until now. Once Mason was calm, Lucy guided him back to the booth and helped him sit. She handed him a warm cup of chocolate milk and a plate of pancakes shaped like little dinosaurs. "See," she said gently, "everything's okay now. You're safe." Mason clutched the cup, his face finally relaxed. Ethan sat across from them, overwhelmed. He felt a lump in his throat. Watching Lucy care for his son in such a natural, effortless way, he realized just how much he had been missing. All his money, all his power, all his fancy toys and penthouses, none of it could teach him patience or empathy. None of it could make Mason smile the way Lucy did. When the diner quieted down a little, Ethan decided to talk to Lucy. "How do you do it?" he asked quietly. "How do you make him feel safe when nobody else can?" Lucy smiled softly but looked down for a moment. "I've been there before," she said. "I had a nephew. He had autism. I spent years learning how to be patient, how to get on his level, how to see the world through his eyes. You can't rush it, and you can't force it. You just have to be present." Ethan nodded slowly. He thought about how many experts and nannies he had hired, how many books he had read, how many schedules he had followed. None of it worked. And yet this woman, just by being kind and patient, had reached Mason in a way no one else could. The rest of the meal passed quietly but peacefully. Ethan didn't eat much. He was too busy watching Mason interact with Lucy, laughing and pointing at pancake dinosaurs. He noticed how Lucy always checked to make sure Mason was comfortable. How she spoke gently. How she celebrated even the smallest victories. Every gesture, every word seemed intentional and full of love. After they finished, Ethan offered to pay for the meal and leave a tip, but Lucy stopped him. "Don't worry about it," she said with a smile. "It's my job. I like seeing Mason happy." As they walked to the car, Ethan felt a strange mix of emotions. Pride, relief, gratitude, and something deeper admiration. He had never thought of a waitress in this way, but Lucy had changed everything. She had taught him something he couldn't buy, how to be present for his son. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He replayed the evening over and over in his mind. Lucy's calm voice, her gentle encouragement. Mason's first giggles during the meltdown, it all felt like a lesson he had waited his entire life to learn. He realized that he had been living in a bubble of wealth and control, thinking he could fix everything with money or rules. But real life, real connection, didn't work that way. It worked with patience, love, and understanding. A few days later, Ethan made another decision. He wanted to help Lucy in some way, even if she didn't know it. He arranged for someone to drive her mother to her medical appointments. It was anonymous at first, but Lucy found out when she saw a car pull up outside her mother's house one morning. She was shocked and went straight to Ethan. "I didn't ask for this," she said, her voice a mixture of surprise and frustration. "I know," Ethan said quietly. "I just wanted to help." Lucy looked at him for a long moment. "You don't have to fix my life with money," she said. "Mason doesn't need a billionaire. He needs a father who sees him." Her words hit Ethan hard. he realized she was right. All his efforts, all his money, all his grand gestures, they meant nothing. If he didn't truly connect with Mason, Lucy hadn't just reached his son. She had shown Ethan what being a father really meant. For the next few days, Ethan focused entirely on Mason. No meetings, no calls, no distractions. He spent hours playing with him, reading books, and even crawling on the floor to pretend to be dinosaurs with him. Mason's confidence and happiness grew every day. He spoke more, smiled more, and even tried to teach Ethan new games. Ethan also tried to rebuild his relationship with Lucy, but carefully. He didn't want to overwhelm her or make her feel uncomfortable. He simply wanted to show her that he had learned something important. His connection was worth more than money or power. One quiet afternoon, as Mason napped at home, Ethan thought about all that had happened in the diner. He realized that Lucy had done more than just make his son happy. She had changed him too. She had taught him patience, empathy, and the importance of presence. She had shown him that love and understanding could achieve more than money ever could. That night, he wrote down a promise in his journal. Not to anyone else, just to himself. Be the father Mason needs. Be the man Lucy believes I can be. And with that, for the first time in years, Ethan felt like he was ready to live a life he had never imagined, not as a billionaire, not as a CEO, but as a father, fully present, fully human, fully connected to the little boy who had finally found someone who saw him. Weeks had passed since that rainy meltdown in the diner, and Ethan's life was slowly changing. He was no longer rushing through his days, obsessed with meetings and numbers. Instead, he spent more time with Mason, discovering the joy of his son's world. Every little laugh, every new word, every small smile felt like a treasure. Mason was growing more confident, more open, more willing to explore life with his father by his side. One bright morning, Ethan decided to take Mason to the diner without any announcement or plan. It wasn't a scheduled visit, and there were no cameras or assistants. Just the two of them in casual clothes, ready to spend time together. As soon as they stepped inside, Lucy's face lit up. "Hey, look who's here," she said warmly. Mason ran to her, his small legs moving as fast as he could, and threw himself into her arms for a quick hug. Lucy smiled down at him. "You've got your big dad with you too," she said, glancing at Ethan. Ethan smiled back, feeling something new in his chest, a calm, steady happiness he hadn't felt before. He watched Mason and Lucy play together, pretending dinosaurs were having a tea party. Ethan even joined in, crawling on the floor, letting Mason guide the game. Mason's eyes sparkled, and for the first time, Ethan felt like he belonged in his son's world rather than commanding it from above. After a while, Lucy handed Mason a small stack of colored paper and crayons. "Draw something for me," she encouraged. Mason picked up a blue crayon and began drawing carefully. Ethan looked over his shoulder and noticed a figure forming on the paper. It was a dinosaur on the floor, a small boy beside it, and a man laughing nearby. Ethan's heart swelled. Mason had drawn the exact moment that had first connected them. The moment Lucy had crawled on the floor to reach him, tears prickled Ethan's eyes. He realized that Mason remembered that moment not just as play, but as a memory of feeling safe, happy, and seen. Ethan leaned over and whispered softly, "You made that for Lucy?" Mason nodded shyly. "It's for her," he said in his small voice. Lucy picked up the drawing, her own eyes filling with tears. "This is the best gift I've ever received," she said quietly. "Thank you, Mason." Ethan watched them, feeling an overwhelming mix of pride, gratitude, and something deeper love that went beyond wealth or status. For the first time, he understood that money could never buy this. Nothing could replace the connection between father and son, or the bond Mason had found with Lucy. Later that day, as they walked outside, Ethan stopped Lucy gently. "I want to thank you," he said. "For Mason. And for me, you've changed our lives." Lucy shook her head. "I didn't do anything special. You're a good dad, Ethan. You just needed to see it." Ethan smiled. "Maybe. But I also want to do something for you. I know you've been working so hard, and I want to help. Not with money to fix everything, but I want to give you a chance to help more kids like you helped Mason." Lucy blinked, surprised. What do you mean? Ethan explained. He had been thinking about creating a small children's therapy center, a place where kids who struggled like Mason could feel safe and understood. And he wanted Lucy to help design it to make it real, the way she had already done for Mason. Lucy looked at him, unsure. I don't know if I could, she said softly. You can, Ethan insisted gently. You already know what kids need. You already know how to reach them. I just want to give you the resources. Lucy took a deep breath and smiled slowly. If you really mean it, I'd love to try. Ethan felt a sense of joy he hadn't experienced in years. Not because of deals, money, or status, but because together they could make something meaningful. Together, they could help other children feel safe, seen, and loved, just like Mason had. As the weeks went on, they began working on the plans for the center. Ethan stayed patient and supportive, but Lucy led the design, choosing colors, toys, and spaces that would comfort and engage children. Mason was included too, often visiting and testing out ideas. It became a family project, one that brought laughter, connection, and hope into Ethan's life in a way nothing else ever had. At home, Ethan noticed more changes in Mason too. He spoke in longer sentences, tried new foods, and even started inviting Ethan to join him in small games he invented. The little boy's world was expanding, and Ethan was right there with him. He learned to slow down, to listen, and to celebrate small victories. Every day became a gift. One evening, as Ethan and Mason walked back from the diner, Mason suddenly stopped and tugged Ethan's hand. "Daddy," he said, pointing at the sky. "Lucy's nice." Ethan smiled, bending down to his son's level. "Yes, she is," he whispered. Mason nodded and smiled, then ran ahead to play with a puddle. Ethan stood there for a moment, watching him. The man who had once lived in a world of numbers, contracts, and high-rise buildings now found his life centered on laughter, love, and human connection. Later, when Mason went to bed, Ethan sat by the window. Thinking about Lucy and the life they were beginning to build together, he realized that he had learned one of life's greatest lessons. Wealth could buy comfort. Power could buy control, but only love, patience, and kindness could change hearts and lives. He thought about Lucy, who had never asked for money or fame, who had only offered kindness and understanding. She had taught him that being present was more important than being perfect. She had taught Mason to trust, to laugh, and to grow. And she had taught Ethan to see that the most valuable moments in life were not in boardrooms or bank accounts, but in tiny smiles, shared laughter, and the simple act of caring in the weeks that followed. The therapy center began to take shape. Lucy guided Ethan every step of the way. From selecting toys and books, to designing spaces that encouraged children to explore safely. Mason became a regular visitor, and each visit reinforced the lessons of patience, love, and understanding. Ethan noticed a new peace settling over his life. The constant tension and stress that had once dominated his days were gone. He had discovered something far more important than business success: connection. Connection with his son, with Lucy, and with a world he had once felt distant from. On a quiet afternoon, as Mason played with a new toy dinosaur at the center's model room, Ethan looked at Lucy and said softly, "Thank you for everything. You've changed our lives." Lucy smiled, a little shyly. "You've changed too, Ethan. You're not just the billionaire. You're a dad who sees his son." Ethan nodded. It was true. For the first time, he felt that he was the father Mason needed and the man Lucy believed he could be. He realized that life didn't need to be complicated to be meaningful. Sometimes it only required patience, love, and someone willing to see the heart behind the silence. That evening, as the sun set, Ethan, Mason, and Lucy stood together, watching the sky turn golden. Mason held Lucy's hand in one and Ethan's in the other. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt complete, not because of wealth, not because of fame, but because of love, laughter, and a family found in the most unexpected way. And in that moment, he knew that everything had changed. His heart was no longer tied to contracts or boardrooms. It belonged to Mason, to Lucy, and to the small, extraordinary moments that made life truly worth living.